Welcome to Conscious Capitalism of Central Maryland's Pivot or Not, Here I Come, an inside look at leadership and conscious business. My name is Wendy Moomaw, and I am the board president of Conscious Capitalism of Central Maryland, and this has elevated my learning around conscious business, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. I'm excited to be here today with Dan Simons, the co-founder of the Farmers Restaurant Group. We're going to take you through some learning around leadership in the beginning, and then in the middle, we'll transition to a conversation with Dan to learn about the practical applications of conscious leadership during this COVID time. So first, a question. Where are you? Please stand up and create a little space in front and behind you, and imagine you're standing on a horizontal line. I'm going to ask you a question. As you consider your answer, I really want you to write down any thoughts that you might have before you're deciding. Are you above or below the line? Now you have to choose. You can't have one foot on each side. You have to choose either to be above or below, and you can't be in both places at once. So I ask you, are you above the line or below the line? Go ahead and capture your thoughts. What's going through your mind right now before you decide whether you're above and below the line? Now let's go ahead and watch this video.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks. www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question: we are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
Now that you've seen the video, and you now know what it means to be both below the line and above the line, it's time to ask yourself, at this point in time, are you really above the line or below the line? And let's take notice. We ask leaders to make these decisions all the time. We don't give them enough data. They don't have any information. They have to make decisions, and they have to make them on the spot. So we don't always know and have all the information we need. So what impacts you? Make a note of what resonated for you in the video and where it is you feel you were showing up. One thing to notice about being above the line and below the line is we can directly correlate it to the Leadership Circle Profile 360, which is a leadership assessment that is both the developmental tool and also a framework of leadership. Notice the creative competencies are above the line, while the reactive tendencies are below the line, much like in the video. One thing we notice is in high creative leadership, there is a 0.93 correlation between leadership effectiveness and the creative competencies. That means that if you have creative competencies and you develop them, that you are directly impacting your leadership effectiveness. And the reverse is true when you're below the line. For high reactive leadership, there is a correlation between the effectiveness of a leader and the number of reactive tendencies they have. Meaning, the more reactive tendencies that they have, the less effective their leadership. Then they captured the average leadership effectiveness scores for leaders in the highest performing business, the top 10%. And they also compared it to the average leadership effectiveness scores of the leaders in the lowest performing businesses, which were the bottom 10%. And what they noticed is that businesses evaluated as the highest performing, the top 10%, their average leadership effectiveness score was at the 80th percentile. What this means is that if you're a highly creative leader, there's a better chance that your business is going to be higher performing. So what really separates the most effective leaders? There are 3 areas that are specific strengths that are listed in the qualitative entries of the Leadership Circle Profile 360. And when they looked across that data, they saw 3 things. There are strong people skills, they are team builders, and the most effective leaders are also good listeners.
So I'm super excited to have Don Simons here visiting with us from DC. One of the things we know about leadership is we can talk about it, and then there's a question of what does it look like? So Dan is the co-owner of the Farmers Restaurant Group. And the Farmers Restaurant Group really unbundled the supply chain by taking product directly to consumers. How do they do that? They represent 47,553 farmers in the North Dakota Farmers Union. And they have 7 restaurants and 1 distillery in the DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania area. So they're moving food directly to the consumer. Not surprisingly, there's a number of things that have had to happen since then, so they pivoted to the Founding Farmers Market and Grocery. Dan is also the founder of Our Last Straw, which is a business-led coalition to reduce reliance on single-use plastics. And he's also the advisory board of Conscious Capitalism of DC. Dan, thanks a lot for being here with us. I really appreciate you being here to share about your business. And really, I wanted to invite you to share. So from the outside looking in, we were able to share the video from WTOP, which really talked about this is what the organization looks like and the results of our pivot. And there's also kind of the inside view looking out, which is really what did you need as a conscious leader to prepare to pivot? So I'd love you to share. And we do have.
Well, Wendy, thanks for having me and to the whole group. First of all, thanks for being a group. I think, conscious capitalism and any of this mindful leadership to get momentum. We know that we're stronger together. And so it takes folks coming together to, share the message, teach from each other, learn from each other, teach to each other. and really create a coalition, I think, to do what we all believe in doing, which is, moving society forward in a way that takes care of everybody and that includes far more stakeholders in a business than just the dollars and the greenbacks. So thanks for having me here. It's fun to talk to other conscious capitalism believers, and I know that everybody's at a different place with their own conscious capitalism journey, so it's a neat thing. There's no litmus test for what makes a conscious capitalist. I think there's just the question of are you interested in being mindful about business, and do you believe that business is a wildly powerful force for good when you understand the pillars and stakeholders and how things can really come together. So that's my long way of saying, like, thanks, I'm on board, I'm aligned, and it's nice to be here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about what you've done recently.
So, for us, we built our company. We started, the first Founding Farmers opened 10 years ago. So so I should say, I'm a restaurateur. Like you heard in the intro, we're a small business. So we grew from zero to one restaurant, two restaurants, and up to, just over 1,000, almost 1,200 employees. And we built our company solely for the mission of what we were doing. Like, I could have opened a lot of restaurants and built a different company, but the mission was clear. We wanted to advocate on behalf of American family farmers. We wanted to be a market maker for family farm product. We wanted to be a role model in our industry for the use of family farm product. And we wanted to be able to advocate on these issues and kind of influence society on behalf of American family farmers. And we wanted to do that in a company that could put mission over profit, with the belief that we would create plenty of profit. Plenty meaning enough, not too much, not obscene amounts, just enough profit that investors would want to continue to invest with us, and that every investor that we talked to would know what the mission was and what the goal was. So we believed we could create a company where there was alignment from the get-go, and that we wouldn't have to deal with a push and pull of investors or banks or mission or vision. And so we did that. And I'm really thankful that we have done that, because over the years, the company has shown itself we can get through hard times. We opened the first restaurant in September 2008, and the world was falling off a financial cliff. And people said, "Oh, this is crazy." And I said, "No, I don't think it's crazy. I think we're going to treat our employees really well, and we're going to give the guests great value, and we're going to consider the planet is a stakeholder in our business, and the community is a stakeholder in our business." And it did go well. And now that we face this, COVID world, I think that the teams and the companies that make it through this, I'm also like an optimist, and I believe in karma. So I'm going to say that I like to think that the companies that will make it through this will be the ones who are doing right by people. And we were able to change really quickly to create a whole new business. So doing restaurant to go food is not a business model. And COVID world, I decided, looking at the science, is going to last for a while. So we leaned on our company culture of commitment and tenacity and resilience and being motivated with our original mission for the company. We created a new business, and we laid off 1,100 people on March 16th. And on March 17th, we started working on the new business. And on April 4th, we launched the new market and grocery. And since then, we've rehired over 300 people. So, and I think the reason it's working is because of the company culture and our ability to balance head and heart decision-making. It's got to be fast decision-making, and there's definitely speed going on here, but we haven't lost sight of, our character and our integrity and our principles. So that's my quick summary.
Yeah. So congratulations on doing the pivot to Founding Farmers Market and Grocery. What do you think was the biggest challenge for you in deciding to do market and grocery?
Fear. Just overcoming the sort of holy smokes, this what we're proposing to ourselves is impossible. We're talking about recipes, packaging, logistics, execution system, all in cash constrained and no money, all while everybody is scared to work. And we're talking about labeling and a whole new website, spinning up a whole e-commerce platform, creating our own delivery. We made our list of what it would take, and then we said, well, that's not possible. So the biggest challenge was just, it took us 24 hours for my partner and I to say, you know what, we're going all in. And it doesn't matter that it's not possible. It has to be possible. So I think fear and self-doubt was the biggest hurdle that we had to clear.
And how about for your teams? Like, what are you noticing? Because you're, of course, it's one thing to say I'm a one-person business and I have to pivot, right? I'm checking in with myself and I'm going off and I'm making the shift and change. Once you build a business and you start to scale out, now you're still needing to make the shift and change, but now everybody is distributed, and your teams are operating in different environments. So how did that?
I think the most important thing there was and is alignment. You're right. It's easy to sit alone and make a decision. If you're just managing a team of one, get over your fear, make a decision, and off you go. And so at our smallest during this moment, we had 83 employees. And now we're up close to 400, I think, with everybody we've hired back. But I needed to get everybody on board and share the vision and explain, look, this is why. The first hurdle we had to clear was the question of, why don't we close? Shouldn't we just close? Isn't that the safest thing to do? And isn't that the best thing to do for society? And, what do we want to be part of spreading this virus around? And we should close the business. So the first thing I had to do was explain why I believe that restaurants and what we did is essential infrastructure. And I explained, look, so there's a whole explanation that goes with that, right? Providing food to the community. I promised all 1,100 people we laid off that we'd give them free food for as long as the business could exist. And so, you can't honor the promise to give people free food if you close the business, and you can't pay health insurance if you close the business. So it was about communicating alignment, explaining the vision, and explaining why it would be beneficial to all of us based on like, hey, what do we believe? What's important? And that's what I went through with my team. And I said, so rank what's important to you, okay, what you'd like to see accomplished and what matters. Now let me tell you, if we go this direction, how many things on your list are going to come true? If we go this direction, how many things on your list to come true? And it became pretty clear that everybody, literally 100% of our team at the time said, oh, yeah, I'm on board. We should stay open. So it was creating alignment, getting folks on the same thing, not telling people what to do, but sharing the vision until it became a truly shared vision. And that's what then put us in position for everybody to be working towards that.
So prior to COVID, which seems to demand a pivot, especially if you're in the restaurant business, what would you say was the difference between COVID really said, you got to pivot right now, like scarcity, right? You got to pivot right now. But businesses are pivoting all the time. They're stepping into pivots. There's different markets opening up. So what would you say was the intricate thing that made this pivot possible?
I think we had resiliency built into our existing structure. And I mean it in the tangible structure. So the very well documented operating systems. And I think we were a high performer in what we did in a broad and deep way. So we weren't, some people in my space they're restaurants, but what they're just really good at is food, or what they're just really good at is beverage, or what they're just really good at is service, or what they're just really good at is strategy or back end. We had built a company that we may not have been amazing at anything, but we were at least really good at a really broad range of what we saw as kind of a holistic business. And so that depth of systems was resilient in that, a good system by its nature is one that, replicates and sustains, but also, at least in my business, one that it can adapt. And so that's what our business does anyways, right? Sales go up and down, customers' preference changes, but the systems have to evolve. So I think the tangible resiliency we had in our systems, and then the resiliency we had in our culture. I mean, trying to do what we just did, or trying to really take on any pivot at any time in the business, if everybody doesn't believe in what you're doing, the hard part is not drawing the map. The hard part is actually going on the journey. And so I think that's what the pivots are. I mean, yes, in some businesses, like I didn't have to be a genius, and trust me, I'm not a genius, to figure out what we needed to do here. Like we had to make a change. That was obvious. I think the magic that the team has is in saying, okay, now let's go execute this plan. And that to me is the journey. So I think resiliency and flexibility were the ingredients that anybody needs in a pivot, whether it's in this crazy world or anytime.
So now you're in this new space. You've pivoted from the restaurants over to the market and grocery. And there's talk that, hey, I think we're going to start opening up. And opening up in Texas looks like restaurants can open up, but you're only allowed to, the governor says 25% capacity in restaurants. Georgia says, hey, yeah, we can have people in restaurants or have people in beauty salons, not quite sure with restaurants yet. Texas says you got to have disposable menus, disposable plastics, sanitation areas. Everybody has to sit more than 6 feet apart. And some restaurants are saying, listen, at 25%, I can't make it work. So I'm not going to open until something else changes. So now you're kind of in this emerging world where maybe both may be true. I could maybe have a restaurant that opens up, and I could also still continue offering market and grocery, and any number of options in between. So what are you seeing for the future of where this is going?
So, I mean, part of my answer is I don't know. Like, I have no idea. You just described it really well. Like what a business nightmare. You don't really. There's throttles on access to customers. There's throttles on your throughput. And by the way, there's a whole new cost structure of safety and sanitation and equipment. Oh, by the way, there's all new risk with liability with your employees and your customers. Great. Anybody want to come to the party? So that said, I do actually know what we're going to do, which is because we decided to keep the business going, and we're actually we're growing sales on the market side right now, and we're actually growing our to-go and delivery sales right now. I think by keeping our name out there, and because some of our competition, I don't really think of it as competition, but just meaning like other food providers are closing their doors and saying that they're not going to come back ever or not going to come back. So we're able to grow. So when the governor of Virginia just said, he had said he was going to move with Maryland and DC, that would have helped us. We would have had, 6 weeks to plan. Then he says, oh no, May 15th. But I won't tell you what the rules are yet. So my fixed costs are kind of my fixed costs. If I can have 10 customers come in the front door, sit spaced apart, I'm not really going to add much labor to have to serve them. I'm already cooking, I'm already going. So I'm looking at it like even 25% revenue or 25% availability, whatever we have to do to keep people socially distanced, it's incremental revenue on top of a base fixed cost and on top of a machine that's working, with the market and grocery and the restaurant. So I just have to figure out how to run the hybrid models and do all the things at the same time. And I think my biggest challenge is just workplace safety, like workplace safety and communication, keep my people safe, keep my people feeling that they want to come to work as opposed to they need to come to work. and then layer on this and then adapt. I assume what's going to happen is cities and counties are going to open up. You're going to do some business. I don't get it. I think then the virus is going to come back, and then they're going to tighten up. So we're kind of trying to prepare for how to ride the roller coaster, essentially. And it's scary because we're almost out of cash.
Mm. And so that's so thanks for that vivid look at the outside, really, what people can see on the outside looking in. And so we see a lot of press, and we're really excited for you guys to be able to have done this pivot. And we know that it's serving people who are finding it hard to get what they need in order to eat at home. And so I'm thinking also, I'm curious about the inside looking out. So when I work with leaders inside organizations, we're constantly looking at, this is how my leadership is affecting others, and these are the results I'm getting. And then there's this piece about what is going on inside for the leader. So you had mentioned a little bit around fear. And there's some other processing that leaders do. So from the inside out, on this, in this learning environment, there may be leaders who are in a space of going, I want to become a conscious leader. What do I do now? And how do I shape my trajectory so I can get to the place of growth and being able to leverage that foundation of being a conscious leader? What might you say to leaders in that space?
Well, I think especially in times like this like conscious leader recipe, it really proves its value. I have to be right now. And I'm going to answer a question from I'm sharing what works for me. I don't know what works for anybody else, right? So this is it's not advice for you. It's experience sharing for me. And if it sounds good or you like it, as a leader, great. I have to be as good or better listener in times like this. I have to be able to be vulnerable and in the moment know what is my own anxiety versus what is my fact-based gut instinct. I have to be able to share my vulnerability with the people that I'm leading, so that they can understand where I might have a struggle, so that my team and my business partner can help know, am I really clear with a good solid plan and a reason of why I want to do this one thing on here's why I want to make this decision. I need to help my team interpret that, because is it my fear driving me? No, we shouldn't reopen yet, and we shouldn't do that because this, or we should only use the patios. I need to be a good listener so that when one of my team questions me and says, are you sure? And I hear those words, are you sure? I really listen. And I know that actually what they mean is they don't think that's a good idea. And they think that maybe I'm making that decision from a place of, fear or lack of courage. And so, are you sure generally doesn't, the question, are you sure, is not actually asking for me to say, yeah, I'm sure. The question, are you sure, I take it as a mirror that I need to look in and ask myself, what's driving the direction that I'm giving? So, being a great listener is something I try to hold myself to. And not do I think I'm a good listener, but does my team feel like I am a good listener? So I know that I can't anoint myself a good listener. I have to ask for that kind of 360-degree feedback and really get folks around me that I trust. Like, hey, does it seem like I'm listening? And part of that process for me is, if all I ever hear is like, yes, you're doing it right. Yes, it's great. Yes, well, then I know I'm not. Because how can you always be a great listener? How can you always be inclusive? How can you always show your vulnerabilities and then understand that strength comes from being vulnerable? I can't get that right all the time. And so I think, making sure that a leader creates a safe environment to really give that feedback. That's really, for me, I think, so I'm just going to recap for myself, right? Listening skills, vulnerability is where you get strength, and having people around me who can, really give me feedback. That's really, for me, what the inside of this thing looks like. It's really easy to go on the news. It's really easy to do a webinar. It's easy to get good media hits. It's easy to, that stuff is pretty easy because you can just, like, for the moment, show up and deliver the message. But the hard conversations and the scary stuff, like, we're trying to make a decision. Shit, we got to decide tonight. I'm not sure. Well, could we at least sleep on it? I know we have to decide tonight, but I think, like, okay, let's decide, but let's not tell anyone our decision. And then let's wake up and see if we feel the same way in the morning. That's some of the stuff that, if there was a camera on us the whole time as leaders, would be a little messy. And just accepting that messiness inside and remembering that I'm human and we're all human. I don't know if that's the kind of answer you were looking for, but that's what went through my head as I heard your question.
No, that was super helpful. So what I heard you say was, and you mentioned resilience earlier inside the organization. You talked about vulnerability. You talked about, like, being a really good listener. But what I noticed also, it's not just hearing what people have to say, right? It's hearing it and then reflecting it back to decide, is this really what they're trying to say? And then I'm curious from there, if it's not what they're trying to say, how do you re-engage in that conversation with people? Or do you resolve it yourself?
I think, I try to really engage in the debate. And so I sometimes say to, my team, wait, hold on. Let's argue about this for a minute. Like, I don't know actually who's right or wrong. I'm going to argue because I think I'm right. I need you to argue with me because I might be wrong. And so, like, setting up that construct, it's much easier to have a robust debate when you've agreed, oh, let's argue, because I think if we're really arguing, I can understand your point and you can understand mine, and let's see what happens if we argue it out. And then the argument is a debate, right? Which is effective, because the typical argument is people are like this. I'm looking for an argument that is like, oh, wait, no, but you said this, that doesn't work. Oh yeah, good point. Well, if that doesn't work, does this work? And it's, sort of arguing, but within the context of we're on the same team. The argument is to how to, like, really pound through it. And yeah, please let us argue. So that is how we try to go about it. And I'll say to my business partners sometimes, and we've had many of these conversations over the past 5 weeks, I'll say, I'm not where you are. Like, I get that you're bullish on this. I'm not. You think this is going to work for these reasons. I'm hearing those reasons. I don't think it's going to work, and here are my reasons. But, as I say all that out loud, what I realize is I'm not certain. Some things I'm certain about in life. I'm certain that I'm right. I don't know. So you know what? Let's try it, because you'll either be right, in which case it's actually good news, or we'll try it and I'll be right, it won't work. But either way, we'll have the set of facts. So let's go into it. Like, let's just go all in and try it. And by acknowledging that we're not on the same page, we can end up getting to the same page to try an initiative. And that's really effective for us.
I really appreciate how you're revealing the invisible, right? Which is, we're in conflict. We're either going to have conflict outright by an invitation to argue, or we're going to have the conflict by taking two different positions and not discussing it. So it's a really beautiful way to invite a team into a richer, deeper conversation. So I'm going to ask you one more question before we move off to the Q&A with the group. What's the best thing about pivoting in COVID-19?
Easy. So focusing on entrepreneurial work, like getting my hands on the steering wheel of something I feel like I can control or I can do, is awesome. Compared to, like, the pit in my stomach and I'm scared and what are we going to do, and watching our business get destroyed and watching a virus kill people, and reading the news. I mean, that is just, all of that is so outside of my control. So like setting it aside and going all in on like, let's plan, let's do math, let's make decisions, let's push forward. That has actually felt like a gift that we have something to work on that feels tangible, that we can control.
Beautiful. Thanks for that. Brian, do you want to ask some questions from the chat room?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan. Wow. What an awesome interview. So rich and so brilliant. And we've got some really great questions from our audience members. And the first one that I want to share was from actually one of our members of our chapter.
Yeah, I was a conscious capitalist before I knew that was a phrase. And I actually met David Gardner, who's on the national board, at another speaking event. And I used the term, I was the speaker at an event, and I'd said, I was just explaining our business and our culture. And I said, I guess I'm just a conscious capitalist, and there's more to this than money and blah, blah, blah. And he came up to me afterwards. He's like, oh, hearing you say you're a conscious capitalist, that's great. Did you enjoy the book? And I said, well, what book? And so he introduced me then to the book and this actual phrase and the pillars. So, what inspired us to start our company the way we did, the way I was raised, I spent my whole life until I was 33 years old working for other people. So I know what it's like to be an employee. And I always wanted to have my own company. And I vowed that if I ever have my own company, it seemed so obvious to me, but I thought, I'm just going to remember all the ways that I felt when I worked for someone else. And it seemed to me companies do so much stupid stuff to disenfranchise people and disenchant people. And so when I had the chance finally to start my business with my partner, I think my inspiration was like, do what my parents taught me to do, build a company that I always wished I could have worked for. And frankly, had I ever found a company that I thought really honored and acknowledged its employees, I probably would have been okay working for somebody else, for a long time. So that I think is what inspired me to do it the way we did it.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was awesome.
So I just caught some of the tail end of your above the line diagrams, but I think what you were talking about there was essentially, folks who react versus folks who choose their own actions. And at least that was part of it. So I have, from a young age, I learned, just this philosophy of stimulus and response. And so I have, from quite a young age, from sports, studying martial arts, and then in business, I was able to see that the vast majority of regret was when there was no gap between stimulus and response. And that what I always saw people apologizing for or regretting was when it was just, stimulus and an immediate response or a reaction. And so, there's some great philosophy out there written about this, how to actually create this gap between stimulus and response. And so I learned at a pretty young age that when there's a stimulus, I breathe. And so it's in that gap between the stimulus where I get to breathe, think, and choose my action. So I'm certainly not perfect with this philosophy, but what I hold myself to strive to do is to never react. Everything is a chosen action. Every word is a chosen word. I don't often have to say, I'm sorry for things I could have avoided doing. I make mistakes for sure, and I'm good with the word I'm sorry, but for me, it is about living in that space between stimulus and response and choosing my actions. It doesn't mean I don't get angry, but when I'm angry, I choose it because I've decided it's the most effective way to communicate my message. So can't remember the exact question, but I think that
You answered it marvelously.
I think that's how I stay above the line.
Yeah.
I think I got it. Our company culture is really quite specific. And I've learned, quite unique. There's lots of great companies out there. So I'm not saying that we're better than anybody else, but almost everybody that we bring onto our team needs to go through some process of shedding what they knew, peeling off some of the layers, and putting on some of our layers. So, ideally, if we hire well, if we select well and we bring folks on who are either a natural match for us or have the aptitude to be a match for our culture, then things like, fitting folks into our level of autonomy or fitting folks into our level of what we call all-way communication, where like you got to have the courage to say what needs to be said and you got to have the courage to hear what needs to be heard. And if you can't communicate in a comprehensive, holistic, and honest and timely way, you can't work here. For someone who's come from a work environment where you would get sort of beaten for speaking the truth, or people got fired for speaking the truth, there's a lot that they need to kind of unpack and shed. I think the magic in getting people to assimilate to a culture is in understanding your company culture and making sure that you hire and select for it. There's probably some really talented people that I've hired over the years that weren't successful with our company. And it was my mistake for hiring them. They went on to go be very successful with another company. And so it's sort of like dating, you date the wrong person, you date the wrong person. They go off and get happily married to someone else. And so we have documented our culture. We use selection and test to try to hire folks that are, again, a good match for what we do. You can only change people so much, and if you're trying to change people, all you can do is take off outer layers. You can't like repack the deep core. And so we communicate a lot. We sit in the classroom. We do a lot of group discussion. We do orientation. In my mind, it's kind of a multi-month process to really orient and immerse someone. But if you don't hire the right person, then that doesn't work. So that's how we go about setting people up for success into the aspects of the culture that might be foreign to them.
Amazing. That was fantastic. And I just got one last question here that's come out of the chat that I'm personally interested in, because I am an argumentative guy. You can ask any of the people on the board of our organization. Having me on the board is to invite an argument. And one of the questions that Scott brought up in the chat was,
yes, I think there are distinctions, but I don't think it is the distinctions that between a debate and argument that matters. I think what matters is that everybody involved understands what's happening. So if, me and you and Wendy are on a team and we have some stuff to hash through, and like, I'm an arguer, and I want to like go at the topic hard and whatever. But Wendy doesn't understand my style and her construct for what it means if someone like raises their tone of voice or like leans in physically or is like not giving someone else room to speak. If her construct in life of what that is that she's then supposed to shut down and be quiet, well, it's not an argument. It's just me being an ass. So I think the key is, hey, what do you guys want to call it? You want to call it a debate? You want to call it an argument? What style works for you? Because like, you know what? Right now, we're not on the same page. I'm not convinced any of us have the right answer. I really like what I have to say, but I know that that's really not the way a team works. So like, what's going to set you up for success? Do you want to debate with me? Do you want to argue with me? Do you want me to like say my whole piece and then I have to commit to just shutting my mouth while I let you speak at whatever speed you want to speak at, because you may not speak super fast. And every time you pause to breathe, I interrupt you. So I think creating rules of engagement, making it clear what's happening, you know, understanding, you can call them boundaries for sure, understanding, I think of it as like rules of engagement, you know, like so often people are actually capable of working together, but the big mouth shuts down everybody else. And then the team gets used to it, and it's just the way that it goes. And those teams generally don't win a ton of games long term, and people don't, real talent doesn't want to stay on that team. So um, you know, introverts can be wildly good leaders. Introverts can solve lots of issues and problems. People who don't interrupt anybody else often have the best things to say. So call it whatever you want, an argument or a debate, but set up the ground rules and make it clear and make sure it's working for everybody. And I think that's how I see those words.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Dan. Really appreciate you sharing so openly about all these, what's showing up both in front that we can see and look up on the internet, and what's behind, which I think is often hidden from other people. So I have one last question. What's your learning edge with regards to leadership?
And by that, does that mean like, where's the edge of my ability? Like, what's my limitation? Like, is that? Tell me what that question means.
So you can choose to answer it how you'd like. I feel like this is the debate argument kind of piece. The learning edge could be where you feel your limits are, but it could also be something that says the world out there is changing and shifting so fast, and I feel I would be better equipped if I had whatever that is.
So I think having an edge, like the edge, the limit, I don't really believe in that. I don't think. I think each person, the vast majority of people can do way more than they think they can. And then the percentage of people who believe they can do anything, like the super arrogant ones, whatever, they just kind of run themselves off a cliff. So let's ignore them. You know, I'm way more interested in kind of the majority of everybody else who's more inclined to put that edge on themselves, like see another place. I think for myself, I don't know, if there's someone out there who can teach me how to do it, I can learn. If there's someone out there who can teach me and show me why something is so difficult or so complex that I don't have the aptitude or ability, then at least I can understand that and I can find somebody else to do it. So maybe I believe in edges and limitations because I think you need to be aware of them. And then by becoming aware of them, they're not really there anymore because you can solve for them. So I don't know. I don't know if that's just what goes through my mind as I think about just even that word, like what is that edge, or you know, what is that boundary? I mean, do I think I can do everything and anything? No, I know that I can't. But do I think I can accomplish all of the things that are actually important to me in the different roles in my life as a father and a spouse and a sibling and a son and a colleague and a leader and a worker and a partner and a member of community and blah, blah. I think about all the stuff that matters to me. And I think, yeah, there's no limitations there. There's just stuff to ask other people to help or show me the way or teach me and then kind of figure it out together.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom. We're grateful that you've chosen your time to spend here with our organization, and we look forward to being in connection, perhaps in person, someday soon. Wishing you and your team and your greater good that you're touching great health and happiness in this time period of shift and change.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and continue on your journey.
I'll see you there.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dan.